Zahawi is the next Chancellor of the Exchequer. The Iraqi-born immigrant who arrived in the UK as a kid, didn't speak any English, has now risen all the way through the ranks to become the successor to Rishi Sunak, and is tonight confirmed by Boris Johnson as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Let's just run through a couple of other consequential posts. As we've been reporting already this evening, Steve Barclay, who was Chief of Staff, or went a bit wrong under Steve Barclay, but he's been promoted to Health and Social Care. He is the Secretary of State, taking it over from Sajid Javid. And then Education Secretary is the vacant post. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Nadhim Zahawi's deputy in Education, Michelle Donnellan, who's regular on those morning media rounds, fighting on behalf of the Prime Minister, has been made Secretary of State for Education. I think she's a victor for somebody who stood up for the Prime Minister time and time again in the face of difficult questions from journalists about the antics in number 10. So we were just talking about the Prime Minister's dilemma. Do you go for Liz Truss? Do you go for Nadhim Zahawi? We now have a choice, as that ally of Boris Johnson told John Craig not that long ago. More likely to go for him, brings with him potentially a bigger slice of the Conservative Party. Nadhim Zahawi, of course, interesting background. At one stage, he was a backer of Dominic Raab. It took him a little while to get into Boris Johnson's government because he didn't put Boris Johnson, who he knew well when he was Mayor of London in the early years of his time as an MP, but didn't back him in the 2019 leadership contest, just worrying that Boris Johnson was a little bit chaotic. Worth reminding Nadhim Zahawi of that tonight. However, he's made his way up, first as vaccine minister. We'll remember that critical role he played at that pivotal point on the vaccine. Very competent on the media. In fact, he came in after quite a lot of the key decisions being made, but shored up the government's position on the issue of vaccines. Then he pivoted into education, where he has been for some months. Now, the reform agenda that he started to get underway has stumbled a little bit. He's had to rewrite the legislation currently in Parliament. But again, the priority for Boris Johnson is getting a solid media performer into top jobs. That he certainly was in the Education Department, and he will hope that skill is one that transfers tonight to the Treasury.
And before the resignations we saw this evening, the suggestion was that Boris needed to limp forward until recess. If this appointment works out for him and Liz Truss has been offered something to, satisfy her and her ambitions, what does it buy him time? And if so, how much time might it buy him?
So the first thing we have to do is, as you completely rightly say, watch Liz Truss as Foreign Secretary. We don't know whether she's going to react to that. But also, the question is, does Nadhim Zahawi answer the biggest questions of British politics differently? And we're just looking around and seeing a number of security guards walk past. It's a febrile evening. Our eye is caught by all sorts. Does Nadhim Zahawi tonight begin trying to reverse some of the biggest calls on the economy that Rishi Sunak took and made Rishi Sunak unpopular with parts of the Conservative Party? Is he more willing to go for tax cuts? Is he more willing to fund those tax cuts by additional borrowing? Number 10 want to cut corporation tax. They want to reverse parts of the national insurance rise. They want to do all sorts of things to lower the tax burden. But as the black door leaves, there's Deputy Chief of Staff Simon Finn walking out there after probably signals at the end of the most intense bit of the reshuffle, her departure. Does he try to do things significantly differently with an eye of pleasing the Conservative Party to do what you just suggested, which is get through to recess? Could we have an emergency budget or some kind of big statement, more help? Now, I'm old enough to remember, Anna, when Boris Johnson was saying just 4 weeks ago there was no more money to help with the cost of living crisis. We had to change the rules, change what's known as supply-side reform, get rid of regulation to make things cheaper. The question tonight is more spending back on the agenda? Because ultimately those policy differences, which Rishi Sunak talked about in his letter, something that some people were unhappy with his tenure. And so is it not just a change of personnel, but also a change of government direction? And is it enough?